NJOROGE is CEO and MD at East Africa Data Handlers, a cyber forensics expert. He's back in the studio. Good morning, George.
Good morning to you. Hi.
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Asante sana.
Welcome back to the hot seat.
I realize that it's very easy to get caught up in stories in studios, and I was reading something. I think the other week of an KQ aircraft that crash landed in Kisumu, where the pilot and the co-pilot were involved in so many stories they forgot to drop the landing gear. And it barely landed, I think, many years back. So these things can happen when you have forgotten to go live, or you are just excited about the stories in the studios. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Last time you were here was before the election.
Yes.
And you were talking about, security of IEBC's technology, particularly on the transmission side and also at the voter identification side. And you were raising issues and saying, from what we've seen in the past, it's important that they assure us that what they have is tamper-proof. Now, here we are today. Azimio has gone to court, and not only Azimio, plus 8 others have gone to court, are challenging the declaration by the IEBC chairman of William Ruto as the winner of the presidential election.
True.
Among the allegations is tampering with the technology. Now, you, as a cybersecurity expert, you have also been working on this election. Yes? And you've also been coming out on social media and various platforms talking about what you're seeing.
True.
So what have you been seeing?
Well, I think it's as originally raised, is that the technology within IEBC was not as provided, not as tamper-proof as originally given. And if you even forget about everything else and you say, yes, we've been good, I mean, the numbers that you find, their calculator was still not adding up even to 100%. So as simple as their calculator never worked to everything else, then suddenly we had a problem.
Hey, George, you're also in that part of 10.01, 100.01%. Surely not you.
No, for all we know, George may be on 0.2. So, I mean, George.
So, what do your numbers, the numbers that are announced by Wafula Chebukati, what do they add up to? Is it 100% or not?
No, they're not 100%. There's a whole number is a whole number without additional decimal points. I mean, if they are there, then suddenly it's not a whole number. So, but essentially, all the issues that we raised when we met with IEBC at Windsor were the same things that are coming out today. Number one is the issue of the voter identification.
But then, if I may just ask, you are allowed to talk about these things?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
I mean,
please.
there is public... No, there
Please, technically go on. Yes.
try and make what is available within public knowledge.
And,
Yes,
also,
public knowledge.
and also, for purposes of clarity, you were meeting IEBC in what capacity?
Okay. So at the time, we were meeting IEBC Azimio to try and raise the technology concerns for the elections that was coming up at the time. And the issue that was raised was that the voter identification was a problem. And the issue of Kim's kit was critical to identify voters. What was coming out is that as the voters went to the polling booth, a couple of them were not identifiable. There are others who were not identified completely. There are others that were forced to be identified using manual systems. It is alleged that very many Kim's kit also failed within the platform. There are no mechanisms for mitigating the same, where somebody went to court and at least they got a court order requiring that the Kim's kit become the principal used device. Hence, the manual registers were not available in some of the polling stations. So essentially, it means I think one of the presidential candidates never managed to vote, or it took them quite some time to vote. So these challenges had been foreseen, but no serious mitigants were put in place to provide for the same.
It's interesting because when you were here prior to the election, I mean, I think it was, and I believe I asked, I said, okay, this is serious stuff that we're talking about here.
Yes.
If we're looking at a system then that essentially is not going to be able to deliver on what it said it would. And what was then the recourse that they said they would take to make sure that these things were moving along smoothly?
The guarantee that was issued, even at the time, was that every polling center would have an extra 6 KIMS kit. You would bear witness, I think a couple of polling stations voted manually. Others were not able to identify voters. You find that voters who went there and they found, yes, they were identified, but they were identified as somebody else. So there was a mix-up with the biometric data. And that in itself created the crisis that we saw, where you're seeing today, there's an allegation that the the number of people who voted for the presidential candidate, there's a serious disparity between them and those who voted for the other positions that are available, either the gubernatorial, the Senate, or the member of parliament. So this disparity is being seen openly owing to the fact that the identification process of the voters had serious issues that were needed to be addressed at the time.
But still, at the point of identification, there was either you are identified using the KIMS kit, which has 9 ways of trying to identify you biometrically, from 10 ways from each of your 10 fingers. If that fails, there is the alphanumeric, which is taking your ID and entering your ID number onto the KIMS kit. If all that fails, then you go into the manual register, which then you cross out the name. So by and by, there's definitely one of the 11 ways in which a voter could be identified.
Okay.
Are there instances where you've had a voter went to a polling station where they had confirmed that they are registered in that polling station and they were not identifiable from any of those?
Yes, there has been there.
They had confirmed, and they are on when they sent 77, what was that number? 70,000.
Yes.
It tells you that your polling station is SpiceFM studio in Standard Group Center, Nairobi. You come to SpiceFM studio and you are not on the list.
Yes.
How many cases that
I have
like that?
personally have an incident where my own immediate neighbor to my house could not vote. The wife could not vote owing to that issue, where she is available on the online portal. Her details are being replied back by the system, but at local polling center where she was voting, she's not being able to be identified. And this disparity would happen, for instance, remember the data was split into small 700 files that would be allowed within each of the polling centers.
Yes.
So it would be maybe the splitting process where some data could have been skipped, or when the query was run on the entire database, some of this data was somehow left out. And this is natural. Remember, any technology that we have is subject to bugs, subject to failure, subject to it not always working as required. So the process of transfer of data is certainly a process that would require that some data is missing.
Okay. Now, looking at the transmission, there's, of course, many questions that are coming in transmission. Would there be any reason, I mean, just from what you see, that what you've then transmitted electronically would be different from what you then hand on manually?
Now, that is a question that is being put across even as we speak right now. Is that the original form that were taken a picture from the polling centers were taken using a JPEG file was created, which is a picture. Then they were transmitted to the IEBC portal. What was available at the IEBC portal? What file format was it?
A PDF.
A PDF. At what point did we change the file from a JPEG to a PDF?
I don't know.
Let's stop. PDF I've come across. The other one is called what again?
JPEG.
Okay, what exactly is it? What does it do that is different from this other one?
Now, one is a picture. Picture two.
Which one is the picture?
The JPEG.
The JPEG.
Yes.
That's picture.
Yes.
All right.
Now, the PDF is a file format that is different from
Yes, PDF I've come across. I've even used PDF myself.
You even take photos.
Photos I take. So when I take photos, that's PG what again?
PDF.
Okay.
Now, when it's translated, at what point did that file format change? Why didn't we not have JPEG in monochrome? Because they're all transmitted in monochrome, meaning it is not colored to a simple file, to a simple monochrome file. So it means at one point that file was changed. Where was it changed?
So hold. Okay. Take picture. PG.
PDF.
No, PDF I've gotten.
Yes.
The other one with the picture. PG.
JPEG.
Okay, JPEG.
Yes.
Okay, now, when I send it, you're saying I should receive it as JPEG also.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
I see. So you're saying when it was received now, it stopped being JPEG, it became PDF.
Yes.
Even I.
Is that an impossibility?
Well,
Is it impossible for a system to convert files as it saves them?
well, it is not
For
an impossible
download.
thing.
Because what happens? What was the transmission system? When the result is sent from the KIMS kit, it goes into a central server.
Yes.
If I remember that map that the IEBC had posted even on its Twitter. Then from that central server, it creates copies. As it's creating copies, it creates a copy for the public and it creates other copies. So is that possible that the central server, as it's creating copies for you to view, is that's the point when it's converting?
You see, the challenge with the conversion is one. In terms of forensic evidence, then the new file cannot be said to be the original file.
Okay.
And IEBC had guaranteed us that that transmission will not change. What leaves the polling center is what appears at the public portal.
That
The
was
information
narrative, was it
or the
not so?
document?
The document. Both.
The document has the information.
Yes.
Now, hey, okay.
The process of changing the file format
Yes.
would certainly change something.
But not necessarily the content.
Maybe the content.
One doesn't know,
One doesn't know.
but a change will occur.
A change will certainly occur, or a change has occurred, or changes happened.
So does that interfere with the authenticity of the document? If we're saying that what needed to happen was that the transmission needed to happen in its original format, and if that did not occur, then we are saying the authenticity of this process then has been compromised. Is that what we are saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Because if I send you an email and I attach a picture between yourself and maybe it was your birthday, you expect to receive an actual email with the pictures. Not for it to go somewhere else, get translated, and then you receive it.
But remember, George, you are not the intended recipient. You, as the public, are not the intended recipient of what is being transmitted from the KIMS. It is the IEBC server. So I'm looking at actually results transmission system. From the polling station, they have a photo of the KIMS kit. A presiding officer of the polling station sends results using RTS application, which is the results transmission system
Yes.
application. It goes to the back office. The back office application receives and processes the information. This back office is drawn as a key server.
Now, what is that word processes?
Wait, so now we go step by step. From that point, this back office sends to public portal. The result forms are published as they are received on the public portal, and the public user can see the results live. Another arrow goes to the tally centers receive results from the back office applications. Another arrow goes to the returning officer, which is the returning officer connects to the back office application, the returning officer at the constituency.
True.
Okay? So there's one central place. All this information from the 46229
There's a word
comes into
you're
a room.
skipping.
See, I'll come back to the word. Comes into this server room. Server room is the back office application. It receives and processes the information. And after that point, it now gives you a copy public information you can consume. It takes to tallying center for consumption, and it has a connection
But they
with the
say
returning officer.
as received.
Yes.
The key word here is as received.
Yes.
Yes, from the back office.
You see, when you receive a message and I sent you on WhatsApp, WhatsApp does something very nice. It forwards to you. If I send you a forwarded message, even if it said I love you and had been sent by somebody else, you realize that it's a forwarded message, is it?
Yes.
So at what point when I copy and I paste it on your WhatsApp, it changes and you don't see it as a forwarded message. You just see it as a new message, is it?
Yeah.
So the aspect of forwarding means that there is no change that has happened to the originality of that message.
Yes.
IEBC commits that as received, they'll forward to us. We don't see the arrow in our WhatsApp.
Well, you don't see an arrow when I forward you an SMS. The IEBC server is not WhatsApp. I mean, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, though, George.
In a minimalistic way. Let me tell you what happens, just to try and complicate it.
Yes.
When a file is sent, it acquires its own individuality. That own individuality is called metadata. That identifies when it was created, who created it, the time it was created, which is a timestamp, and the machine used to create it.
Okay.
When it is received, that metadata doesn't change.
Yeah.
Okay.
When IEBC changes the file format into a whole new file, the original file is no longer there.
Okay.
What we are dealing with is a copy
Of the original.
of, not the original, of what purports to be the original,
Okay.
has seemingly some information that seems to be the original, but doesn't have the metadata of the original file that was transmitted. For you to consider one item as original evidence, it is only the original image that is the original.
Okay.
Anything else that is being presented in the public portal is not original.
Okay.
And that is it.
Okay.
And you see, remember on the 2017 Supreme Court ruling, when they were forced to provide a whole process, is to encourage the transparency of the whole process. Where that aspect, when you said it is received at the server and it is processed, what is our processing?
To maintain what you're saying, what ought it to look like? This is the thing, because if we're saying that there's a copy of, not forwarded as received, etc., what should it be when you look at it? And for all the tech types that will go then and look at metadata and all of this, what should you see then that would determine that this is authentic in nature?
It is exactly what was transmitted. You need to realize something. In 2004, is it 2004, when Mandela vied for presidency after he had come from jail? Exactly the debate we are having today happened then. That the public portal they had at the time was hacked, and Mandela's vote were changed. And had they not realized it, Mandela would not have won that election. Because what was being pitched at the time is that votes were being moved. That processing server was processing, and votes were migrating somewhere else.
Okay.
And somebody else was winning, whereas all the votes were being cast in favor of Mandela. The same challenge we are having today, where we have a system that a technology says to be doing some sort of processing.
Okay. So ideally, what you're saying is we should all be reading into the mainframe server, to the main server of the IEBC.
What we should have is something called presentment. What is received is what is presented. You may have what you call read-only, where you just view. Somebody else will have the right to download the file.
Okay.
So every different user will have different rights to do different things.
Okay.
And this is applicable on everyday solutions that we run.
Okay.
When we have ERPs like here, your finance can pay, your procurement can order, but they will not pay. Somebody else will
Legal
approve and
can
help
view.
you. Yes. So these are the different rights that can be given to the same file.
Okay.
So essentially, what IEBC should have done is that they should not have done any translation of the originality of the file as received.
Why would anybody want to do any kind of alteration of the originality of the file that was
You
received?
said translation.
Yes. Why would anybody want to do translation of it? Why would you want to translate it? What would be the reason behind saying, look, this is how people have voted. This is the picture that I've taken because that's what they were doing, taking pictures with phones and sending it. Why would anybody want to change that?
And what is the justification, for instance, of changing it from an image to a PDF file?
Okay.
So what I'm asking, it's when you look at you went to the portal right? You've looked at the portal. Can you tell the origin of the documents that you downloaded from the portal?
No.
You cannot tell.
It's only that it is grouped as from polling station Standard Group and Stream 1, but there's no... If you look at the
So
file...
it doesn't have any metadata.
No.
And it should.
It should.
So it's
Doesn't
possible
have-
to actually have a document that doesn't have metadata.
Yes. No. What has happened is that what has been presented there has been stripped of the aspect of metadata. Like, it's not presented.
And how serious an issue is this?
Well, if it has to be used as forensic evidence, as original evidence, then it cannot be said with the original evidence. Yes,
In the absence of the metadata, the originality cannot be authenticated.
true. And that is a standard qualification for any document to be considered as original. For you to be considered as human, or the person you are, the person you are is your DNA. The DNA of any document
So
is
my
metadata.
DNA is my metadata.
Yes, it is. It identifies you, identifies where you were born, when you were born, your aging process, your age, just from looking at information.
So ugali is the metadata of maize.
George, before we take a break, let me ask you this question. The last time you were here, you told us, as a cyber forensics person, it's very, very important that you secure systems.
Sure.
That's what you do as East Africa data handlers.
Yes.
You advise your clients secure systems.
Sure.
If you are, let's flip the coin. You are not working for Azimio this time. You're working for IEBC. If you're working for IEBC, would you have been comfortable with everybody getting access to the main server? What they are calling, what did I say they're calling it? What they're calling the back office. Would you have been comfortable with everybody reading the document directly as it has come from the polling station to the back office? And here is Eric in Nicaragua accessing back office. Here is somebody in Venezuela accessing back office. Here is George in Nairobi accessing back office. Would you have advised IEBC to do that?
Yes. Why? Because you also access your back office for your bank every time you call the bank to ask them to move money from your account into mobile money. There's something called APIs, and it allows you to integrate into a system and gives you access and gives you sort of a window into the platform, allowing you to manipulate it in sensible ways that is allowed within that rights given to you. And that would have made it easier that the question of tallying is not difficult. Remember, for instance, if we had these images as they were received, it would have been much easier even to tally. Remember, images have OCR, so where you can take a picture and cut out the words and be able to copy and easily be able to tally much more quickly. So essentially, the whole process would have isn't unlike where now we receive the files electronically, they are processed or whatever happens, they are changed. Then you're receiving another file, which you essentially now assume to be original file. Then you start working on it and you use it as a tallying aspect. And that's why you find, for instance, is that you have multiplicity of results. Standard, who were doing their tally, was here. The next media house was somewhere else. Why is it that we could not agree on the numbers?
No, there was no disagreement on the numbers. It's just on
At the
what you're
final
counting.
tally, who has a consistent number to what was presented? Tell me one.
Another conversation. 26 minutes to 9. Let's take this quick break. George NJOROGE is a cybersecurity expert. He is Azimio's cyber guy, right? Now that you told us that cybersecurity experts are also hackers, can you also say you're a hacker? Okay.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We're talking about this election. So, George, somebody went to John Gidongo, and John Gidongo has sworn an affidavit, which is part of the Azimio petition. And according to the sworn affidavit by John Gidongo, this person came to John and said, "Hey,
John.
hili mambo inaendelea huko nje." John. So, the summary of this is he claims that he's part of a group that had been hired by some people And their job was mainly to intercept information that's coming from the KIMS kits. It comes to them, they tinker with it, and then they send it to IEBC server. And though the tinkering was in accordance with several instructions that they have prior received, so this one change, give George Wajakoya, not you, Wajakoya, X number of votes. This one, do this and the other, and then now submit that as what goes into IEBC's server, and then is the IEBC whatever processes blah blah blah. Then George NJOROGE sees. How possible is that? How possible is it for the KIMS kits to have been transmitting to a different center, and then that center is the one that ends up transmitting to IEBC?
Well, the plausibility is very possible. And I use the word plausible because I know that some of these things are possible. There's something called man-in-the-middle attack. Man-in-the-middle attack happens when somebody sits between the source of data and the destination. They sit in the middle, they intercept the information, they manipulate the same, and they send it out. And I'll give you an example because this is what we do largely at data handlers. You find that, for instance, somebody was trying to send an instruction to receive payment. So you are sending an email and you are saying, Mr. Customer, you owe me X. This is my statement. Please send me this money. Somebody intercept that email, changes. The only thing they make changes to is they make changes to the bank account details.
Account details.
And then you receive the email, you receive, hey, by the way, this is from George, I owe him X, he has just provided new bank details, and I send. So that is very possible. And I tell you that with accuracy. I'll give you 4 stations that I tell you I want you to look at. I want you to look at the difference between in Meru County women rep, between the winner and the loser. Look at Mokoroine constituency for the MP, Dagoretti South, the one for KJ and Wawero, Kipipiri, Gatanga, Mokoroine, and Royal constituency.
This is for MP.
For MPs, yes. And women rep in Meru. There's a difference of 18% between the winner and the loser.
Okay.
Why is it that...
But these ones were not being transmitted electronically.
Yes. The question is, how is it possible that 4 random events, and these are the data that I've managed to sample, 4 random events that are completely autonomous of the other, have the same sort of calculatable difference?
You've introduced a different question. Because that's a manually transmitted result and counted and all.
Yes.
This one is asking specific to KIMS kit has transmitted. IEBC has tested, retested, retested their system. KIMS kit communicates with the server. On this particular day, KIMS kit is communicating with your man in the middle.
Yes.
And then the server is communicating with man in the middle.
Yes.
And IEBC has not detected it.
True.
So that you're saying that is a possibility.
It is a possibility, yes.
Probability?
About 60%, 70%. America talked about it in the election when they alleged that the Russians managed to infiltrate the election and change the results that were being transmitted.
That is an example of a man-in-the-middle situation.
Yes.
So the Russians in the middle.
Yes.
In this particular case, the allegation here is some Itumbi guy.
Are you
He's
saying,
Russian.
because you gave the example of a bank, we did have a situation which played out in the media of a certain country losing money to individuals who seem to have intercepted certain monetary transmissions and were now diverting it for their own use. This is from a country's deposit. Again, are you saying that this is another example of a man-in-the-middle situation?
Yes, it is.
Okay, now let me ask this thing, because this bothers me because I don't understand it. There's a term I keep coming across. We even discussed it earlier in the show. Algorithm. Algorithm. I've looked it up, looked at the meaning. Does it play a role in any of these things we're talking about now?
Yes, it does.
How?
Because the algorithm aspect is a question of unexplainable phenomenons that are consistently, that would necessarily not happen even in random functions, but still happens in the same consistency. So, for instance, when we are saying that after every 5 minutes, I'll run to the toilet, after every 5 minutes, and sequentially it will happen. Something happens sequentially at a trigger of something, then that is what we call an algorithm. And you find it a lot in the US, for instance, where there are big games, what are they called, lotto kind of games, where somebody is trying to influence the outcome of a game. And there's 1 billion or 100 million chance to be won, whatever amount is being won, and however big it is. And some of the biggest lottos in the world are in America. But even those, as big as they are, they're infiltrated by persons who install a utility that allows it to compute a number and give somebody a random possibility of guessing the winning outcome.
So in essence, this algorithm actually sets forth a set of instructions.
Beautiful.
Which this system, in a language the system can understand, and then this system obeys those instructions, and then you have this outcome.
True.
See, this JPG thing.
You're on the money, CT.
PG-13J.
Yes.
Yes. I've moved from Word documents right from Excel. I'm now in JPK. What was it again?
Fine form. So, I mean, George, even as we're looking at, and then it can get pretty technical. But if we're looking at then the spirit of all of this and to say, look, are we swimming in, is it possible that we'd have swum in murky waters in this election? Whatever accusations are flying about and allegations are then being made, then are we looking at the possibility of compromise of the results based on what you're saying can happen? Because we're talking about plausibility, we're talking about possibility. Are we saying that the possibility then is really high that the authenticity, integrity of this election might have been compromised from a technological point of view with what you're saying right now?
Yes, and that being a possibility means that the very will of the people is never exercised. I love what Estonia says, that when they went into improvement of technology, Estonia is a country that has highly improved on electronic technology. They say that their democracy allowed the growth of the country into a developed country by the exercise of the very will of the people. I saw a headline yesterday where saying that this parliament will be very busy. I think they put about 15 or 20 guys who have either criminal or specific charges that is being preferred on them. Is at the very will of the people. And are we subverting the will of the people by finding ways of sending people to their ghost house or to public office where else there are issues? So the compromise of technology and election denies the will of the people. And if that subversion is what we would like to address as a people, is that we embrace technology. We use technology to send our children with strangers. Somebody picks my children in an Uber and drops them to school. I have never seen the guy, but the technology tells me you can trust this guy. But we have not managed to build a level of trust with our electronic technology to allow us to be comfortable enough to say person X has been elected and they have been legitimately elected and they represent the very will of the people. That is a challenge that we must cure with technology.
You were giving an example of certain Meru County, Mukurweni, Kipipiri, Katanga. Please finish that story, and what exactly were you trying to exemplify with that story? What were you trying to bring forth?
What I was trying to do is that I kept hearing, I met a couple of MPs who kept saying, I don't understand how I lost, because all my numbers were indicating I got enough people, everybody say they voted for me. So I was trying to understand, how is it that somebody says that they are certain beyond certain, something has happened, but they cannot explain it with words, but they know something happened, but they will not pick it up.
Were they saying they couldn't lose?
They were
Essentially, it's unbelievable that they've lost. There's got to be an explanation.
I mean, if I lose, usually I will greet that loss with disbelief because I
I
went.
don't
I
don't get it.
I don't get it because I go into the election knowing that I'm going to win.
Yes, no.
And if I don't win, I'm saying, hey, yeah, surely. So please, but explain.
But the
further.
question is,
Yes.
why is it that the winner and the losers have an 18% difference?
A consistent 18% difference.
Yes,
In those four.
in those four.
All right. So
Why?
what would it be?
I don't know. And I would like to get it from, and I looked at it and I tried to think, there were new ballot papers introduced consistently across. There's something called permutation and combinations. The possibility that I could sit there, you could sit here. You get like
Yep.
here.
It's a possibility.
There would exist
But
different
is it a
forms.
probability?
It's highly probable. And it is for somebody to go into these specific elections as they are and question some of these numbers and question some of these outcomes with a view of trying not only to turn the outcome, but to better understand how do we better avoid these kind of scenarios. And I think the best lessons we could take from this very election is to understand when we talk about transparent, open, accurate, are we able to tick all those boxes with technology and with certainty that it will be true?
But then, George, if we just use those examples of the four constituencies and a county, right? And say, because there's an 18% consistency in the gap between the winner and the loser, let's look back. We have got to look back into the planning for it to be, because here this is manual. This is not, there is no injection of an algorithm here. It's all manual. The only thing that
Maybe the
happens,
people are the algorithm.
the only thing that happens here is at identification of the voter.
True.
These areas have different numbers of registered voters in the constituencies, in the county, in the polling centers and polling stations. Different number of registered voters. Voting happens, counting happens, tallying happens, announcement happens, all manual. So for there to be some sort of game at play here that makes sure that KJ's win over Waweru is 18%, it's the same thing that's going to happen in Meru, and same thing is going to happen in Gepipiri and in Katanga,
Yes.
then it means that there is a very high coordination of human mind that is also at play here.
True.
That the voters that turned up to vote in Katanga, there was an 18% higher number of voters that turned up to vote in Katanga on this day that voted for the winner. Similar to the number of voters that turned up, that woke up and their mind told them amuka, the mind told them enda upige line, their mind told them chukua ballot ya KJ, weka tick ya KJ.
True.
That would be a manipulation of the mind. Is it possible?
It is not possible. And I think what is
So
strange,
what are we saying then?
what is strange is some of these numbers that don't add up. I took a photo of something in 2017.
Is it because they stand out? They are right there at you, or is it because of a possible manipulation?
Well, there would be very many theories around that. But the one theory that I know is certain is that the possibility of that running across some of these constituencies is next to impossible.
It's very low. I want to ask another question. Now, coming back to the presidential one. All right. So, what is happening at the polling station is you get identified via Kim's Kit. Kim's Kit fails maybe in several areas, 200 plus polling stations, manual.
True.
The other 46,400, 46,009 are all Kim's.
True.
So in 46,000 polling stations, Kim's Kit identifies a voter. Voter is given ballots, right? Voter casts ballot for the president. Votes are counted, and then they are announced at the tallying center. And then that is transmitted to the Kim's Kit to the server.
True.
And then accessible to George and Eric and Ndu. The manual form is taken to the constituency tallying center.
True.
The manual form is then brought to Bomas
True.
as Form 34A, and the tally of the 34As as Form 34B.
Yes.
At Bomas, and you were there, when the returning officers were arriving, they were arriving with a bundle of the forms.
True.
True?
Yes.
And what was being verified in that verification process, as we were explained to by the IEBC, was that they were looking at the physicals.
True.
First of all, is this a true form that was issued to this particular polling station or tallying center.
Sure.
Security features. So we are not looking at the server here. We are looking at the physical.
The physical document, yes.
And the physical document is then what is used to tally and go into 34C. So the C is generated from the physical B and the physical A. What is the point of manipulating the server if the server is not going to help you at all in the computation for C?
Well, unless you know that the tallying system that will be used to key in this data will also additionally have manipulants within it that will advantage you and will follow the original consistent numbers that were originally posted online.
That's why I talked about instructions. So you're saying that even if the elections were conducted manually, at some point, the information would have to get into the system.
True.
So when it gets into the system, is it then possible that it's at that point that what you're referring to as manipulation could take place?
True. And these are some of the things that you would find, for instance, is that I looked at a picture of Boy Avenue in the 2017 election. I don't know whether you've seen that picture. It's available at Standard. I got it from your website. There is a picture of people having queued the 2017 election, having queued all the way to River Road. The queue was that long.
Yep.
Do you know the voter the voter turnout of that polling center was 65%?
Then.
This time, it was exactly the same. How long were the queues?
Yes,
very
but
short.
65% of what?
Of
The registered
voter.
voters
Yes,
in
that
that polling
So-
center.
Polling center.
So are you saying that the impossibility that you're or the improbability that you're referring to relates to, one, the number of voters that are currently there or registered at that particular polling station vis-a-vis those who were there in 2017, and you're querying how it is that a similar percentage
came out, but the queues,
are shorter.
Not anything to go by. If you do what you call crowd sampling, when somebody's far, you look at those people, you can estimate those are 20 people. When you sample the crowd there, doesn't look like that 65%.
But is it possible that then they distributed themselves throughout the day?
I looked at that efficiency, and I was trying to...
Is it possible that, like City, the last time you went to vote in the morning, this time you went to vote later in the day?
Oh, yes, I did.
So you were not in the queue, in the longer queue that you had experienced in...
Actually, the queue, I don't know how it is. Now, this is the magic of elections.
Yes.
My name, how it's configured by IEBC, when I went to check with the officials, he told me here, there were 3 people ahead of me. Was it 4? I didn't have to queue. I just sat there and chit-chatted with the official as I was waiting for these people. It was a short queue. Somebody came and asked after me, somebody I knew, somebody I was in school with, he went to a queue which was much longer. But when I used to wake up at God knows those ungodly hours, those queues
Longer
were long.
queues.
They were unearthly queues. That's why I determined to move to a different time. Yes,
later
exactly.
time of the day.
Because I
Do
figured
you think it's a question of time, or do you think it's a question of numbers? I have been asking this, and one of the things that we need to try and do is look at numbers. These numbers don't lie. Is it consistently everybody kept saying there's voter apathy, but essentially nobody queued. The one queued for long.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is winding down, but I mean, just in terms of looking at this technology, unfortunately, it's tempered with subjectivity, because technology surrounds us. Like you said, you put your kids in an Uber, they're fine. They're gonna get where they're going because you trust the technology. You're on your mobile bank app, whatever. You trust that the numbers in your accounts is what you're seeing on your screen. Every day, across board, you apply for your passport, it's in the system, kind of thing. Why then does it become so difficult or almost impossible then to trust the same kind of technology when it comes to choosing leaders? Because it looks like that's where the bone is. Why?
Because I think, in my honest opinion, the interests for this are far beyond the individual country itself. For instance, our neighbors as countries would be keen to have certain persons within power to influence specific things for their interest. Remember, the interest now goes beyond the country. We are now in a global village where, for instance, the issue of Ukraine affects us. So essentially, if we are able to influence what happens in Ukraine, it means that we're able to affect what's happening here. So essentially, it means that the interest to have people in power and in the right place at the right time is important for not only us as a country, but to even our neighbors and the international community. So it is important that the process becomes critical, and it becomes that it is impossible to infiltrate it. Otherwise, if we are going to depend on technology, if we are going to depend on it to determine the future of this country, the will of the people, then suddenly we must have some level of certainty with its capability and with its ability to deliver exactly what the will of the people is. That's it. That's a bigger picture, in my honest
And the will of the people in this instance, you're saying, is represented by whatever process we went through in voting, that the actual votes are what are presented. True. That is the will of the people.
The same question that was asked in 2017 presidential petition will be asked again next week.
In
The
this
question
one.
is, I gave you 6 ballots. You went and voted for one person. Where did the other 5 ballots go? Because there's a serious disparity between the presidential candidate votes in some specific counties
And others.
with that of the other candidates.
George, let's take a break.
Is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Continuing the conversation with George NJOROGE, a cyber security expert, Azimio's cyber guy. He's here with us in the studio. We'll be opening up the phone lines to hear what you guys think about what we're hearing from George this morning, which is also mirroring what the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition presidential candidate and his running mate have taken to court as their petition against the declaration of William Ruto as the winner of the presidential election. Before we continue, CT, the day's proverb.
If you fear something, you give power to it.
If you fear something, you give power to it. You fear deep state.
You will then be susceptible to believing every conspiracy theory known to mankind and yet unknown. It comes to you say, hey, this is it.
This is
So
deep
you're busy
state.
running helter-skelter because someone says, did you read this? Did you hear this? And you're treating someone's imagination and the expression of it as the truth. And it's just that, someone's imagination. This social media thing. The few times I venture into reading what it says, I am fascinated.
What the social media
Yes,
says.
social media says. Yes.
George, okay, you were at Bomas after the 9th of August. From the 10th, you had access to Bomas.
Sure.
You were at Bomas throughout.
Yes.
When the results started being announced at the polling stations, they were then being transmitted to the portal.
Sure.
And then what was happening is that the polling station presiding officers were heading to the constituency tallying center to meet with the bosses, the constituency returning officers.
Yes.
And they were going in all the boxes
Yeah.
from the polling station. What was happening at the polling station was results are announced, agents sign, presiding officer and deputy presiding officer sign the form. A copy is pasted on the door of the polling station.
Sure.
And the original form is carried physically by the presiding officer to the tallying center.
Sure.
The constituency returning officer then receives all the forms from the presiding officers, puts them in a form, does simple math of carry one, does a total, and that forms 34B.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Takes a bus or whatever to Bomas,
Border.
a board, whatever, goes to Bomas
Yeah.
with the forms, the physical forms. When they arrive at Bomas, because that's where you are, what did you see? What was happening? So
Well-
take us through when a returning officer arrives at Bomas.
Well, what happens is that they have to be presented to the IEBC officials, who then table them to the different tallying teams, based, I think, on the location that are being allocated by the day. Then the tallying team are being superintended by the agents from the different presidential candidates. Then they will now verify that the forms as they are is what has been received.
Yeah.
They do the tally,
Yeah.
they agree, and then they go ahead and allow now the same to be tallied together as a constituency tally. Then it is what the IEBC commissioners are able to pronounce as the final numbers.
Okay. So the first thing that was happening, I'd imagine, is when this person calling himself Charles Timothy Muga arrives at Bombers and says, I'm the returning officer of...
These guys talk about me as though I'm not here.
Tamu.
Carry on.
I'm the returning officer of Muhoroni constituency. The first thing they would do is letter ID, right? To first of all identify that this is the actual person
confirm.
who is gazetted as the returning officer.
True.
The next thing is letter form, and then they check security. Is this the authentic form that came from the constituency? True?
Yes.
And then now they do the math. Higher. At what were they at any point looking at the portal?
No, the portal was not being looked at that point. And in hindsight, I think that's where the blunders are. At one point, when everybody now started complaining on all these issues, this tally and all, you saw there was somebody who went to the microphone and said, Bomas is a scene of crime. With the concern that the tally is not seemingly adding up. There are so many, I think there are so many videos circulating online where any of the IEBC commissioners would go up there, pronounce numbers. Then when you tally yourself, you realize they are over and above what the registered number of people within that area are, or the persons that participated in the very election of that day. An example is given, I think, of Nakuru West. Is Nakuru town or Nakuru, one of the constituencies in Nakuru, where the tally was far more than the people that participated.
The registered voters.
Yes. So essentially, some of these blunders kept coming up. The other thing that kept consistently coming up is you look at forms and you realize this was a 5 or was it an 8? Somebody has made an actual adjustment or an upgrade of sorts to numbers.
In what world, I'm just trying to understand, knowing full well that the glare of the lights was there, everybody was there, in what world would one want to then have a different, and it could be a naive question, a different tally on the paper that you have brought in by bus or however you've come from what is on the screen? And that's part one. Part 1A then is, so what exactly was being used? The technological transmission or the papers that were delivered physically to the constituency and then further on to Bomas?
You see, that question is a very good one because it essentially becomes the bone of contention in majority of the tally. The IEBC chair at one point pronounced himself by saying that the tally we shall use is what is online. Essentially meaning that if it was erroneous, we will not make any adjustments. We will just record it in, they call it a grey book or a black book, whatever it's called, incident book. Record it on the incident book. Then we shall take that incident book to the Supreme Court. So essentially what we are saying is that we will announce numbers that we know are incorrect, that are inconsistent. You will go and find it out in the Supreme Court. The question is that fair? And is there any room whatsoever to make any adjustments on the numbers?
But what we're saying is that didn't happen, essentially. That it is not the numbers that were on the portal that we eventually announced. We are saying that what really happened is that the numbers that were collated in all this frenzy of papers that came to Bomas is what was announced.
No. What was announced is what was on the portal.
So what was the... No, George.
Yes.
At what point did you move to the portal?
We've gone back to the portal now.
The last time I asked you, you
Because
said
the
we're not
question
referring to
is,
portal.
if that is the case, then why were we bothering with what was on the portal?
You see, the IEBC Commission says that if there are errors on the physical document,
Yes.
we will note it.
Yes.
We will record it.
Yes.
But we will not make any changes.
Because they were told that by the Supreme Court in
Yes.
2017.
So essentially what we are saying is that if it's online, if it's this thing that says it quacks like a duck, it's whatever, it's a duck. Essentially what we are saying, if it's online, it looks like this, it's final. So we will change nothing.
Unless challenged.
Unless challenged.
Yeah.
So essentially what we are saying is that we are studying and the process is problematic. The other challenge that we faced heavily was the question of number of people who voted and that tally And some returning officers were making blunders because they were also including the question of number of valid votes and number of people who voted are two different things.
Sorry, George, I have to interject here. Because if at the end of the day, so now let's ask the flip question, because I think we asked this question in one form earlier on. So now let's ask it the other way. If we knew that the results on the portal is what was going to be used, then why would you bother coming and changing anything, writing and changing, if you knew that it was the portal that was going to be announced as the final result?
Maybe that was not the original intent.
But
I know
ask
you're
yourself
contradicting yourself.
No. I don't think so.
What was
think
being
so.
announced, that you've taken us through the entire process.
Yes.
Returning officer arrives at Bomas. They come with a form. The form is what is verified. What is in the form is what is then inputted into Form 34C.
Yes.
It is what is announced by the commissioner there. Form not being used as reference at the verification stage at all.
Yes.
So what is being announced is what is in the form. Physical,
Wait.
not portal.
No, I don't get it. Form being used for verification,
Is a physical form.
yes, that's what it was intended for.
Yes.
And so,
So we are not referring to the portal in Bomas.
so what are we verifying? Because if you're not referring to the portal, then what are you verifying?
What you're verifying-
What are you verifying it against? I mean, you have this piece of paper. So what are you looking to compare the result
The
with?
picture that was sent to the...
What you're
Yeah.
verifying
Yes.
is you're verifying that this is authentic. Number one, that CT Muga is the authentic returning officer, not an imposter. Number two, that CT Muga has arrived with the proper form.
Yes.
Not that CT Muga went to Grogon and printed his own Form 34B.
It has
and
to be a
brought-
reflection of what was
it has to
transmitted.
have it has to have the security features that were put in by the IEBC at printing. So you're confirming the security feature. This is the authentic form. This is the authentic returning officer. And the results that have been brought here in the B also mirror what is in the A's. That is the verification that is taking place on the floor.
And the information of the A's, we're talking about what?
The forms from the tallying center, which have come with this guy.
Eh-heh.
See, this guy was brought
Yes,
the forms by
yes.
the presiding
So-
officers.
So the process of, at what point do you look at the numbers that are in these forms?
In the what?
See, the forms come with a number because
That's it. So once we've identified that this is the authentic,
Yes.
the next thing now is we look, okay, so now the number. In this constituency, these are the numbers. Candidate A, X, candidate B, Y, candidate B, C. We put that in C.
yes, but if we are looking at the numbers, would you this is the returning officer, everything is authentic, but the reason why that person is there to bring the form is because that form contains numbers.
Yes.
Now, if you're talking about tallying means adding up.
Yes.
So if you're adding up and comparing, what are you comparing it with? That's what I'm asking.
You're not comparing.
You're not comparing.
No. You only compare if there's a difference between the B's and the A's.
No, what if what you've brought and what you have in the portal are not the same? Is
That's
there
why
a
I'm
place
saying
where you
It's
look
where
at
this
it?
there is
all
no,
came from
there is
in
no
the beginning.
reference to A. There is no reference to the form, to the portal. At that table, they are not going into portal. They are not going to portal. They are only dealing with the physicals.
And according to you, George, they should.
What they should be doing, yes. Because at that point, if you see there's a disparity between what you're physically holding and what is on the portal,
Yes.
then you're able to point it out and say,
This is
let's
the problem.
remove this,
Yes.
let's put this up. Because essentially, at that point, we would have used the opportunity to clean up the portal. And it would have been what we would have done is that we would have then created what we would consider as a secondary portal, where we are saying results have been received, yes, they're in the portal, they're there, yes, good. Now, each that is verified is ticked. So you'll find, for instance, there's a blue tick on each of the verified results that are certain and undisputed, and that what is disputed will be marked within the portal as disputed. And an alternative narrative provided within the portal, and an alternative tally is provided. So with a tally and a narrative says, this form seems to be different from what we have received. Now we have essentially said that the 34A that we have proved to be original and authentic with all the security is what we will uphold. So essentially we are either deleting this, or if we cannot delete it, then we are secondary uploading. So there will be two forms available. And it creates a whole process of openness. Okay? Because if we say we are telling what is on the portal, and we are saying what is on the portal has discrepancy and would require to be authenticated. At what point then are we subjecting the public to viewing what has been authenticated as legitimate
physical
material? And we are saying we have verified the two, so that what is here and what is here is good. So that when we are saying we will tally all of us agreeing that tuko sawa. But when we haven't put everybody at a space of tuko sawa, then we'll have all these disputes that we're having today.
Okay. George, are there instances where the physical that arrived in Bomas and the thing on the portal are different?
Yes. Many.
How many?
I don't have the count off my head, but the ones are forensically extracted are almost 100 plus.
What is the difference?
Mine was not even in the numbers. Mine was the difference in terms of materials. So, for instance, you find that some of them were blatant mistakes. The KIMS kit could only transmit once. So, some returning officers would make a mistake and take a photo of the KIMS kit, of the form before it is transmitted. Before it's filled up. So, it's transmitted essentially
So, this
when
transmit
it's
a blank.
That's one. Two, some returning officers would take the wrong photo of the wrong form.
Meaning, wrong photo, explain, please.
Sorry, not wrong photo. Yes, the wrong form is photographed. So
instead of an A,
instead of the presidential
34A, they send 35A.
Yes. So you take the parliamentary and upload that. Remember, you only have one chance to do this. That's the second sort of materials that are there. The third one are those ones that we glaring mistakes. For instance, where you'll find that you had 100 votes, they've been reduced to 001. Or they've been reduced to 10, whatever it is. The zero at the very
How
end.
do you know that there were 100 votes to begin with before they were reduced?
So you'll find, for instance, you can always tell a number that has been edited, has been...
Okay, what we're asking is, what are the features? What is it that you look at and say this one has been altered?
So the alteration is outrightly clear, where even you find some of them are countersigned.
Meaning manually?
Manually, yes. Remember, all these things were being filled manually.
Okay.
Yes.
The others are the ones that really don't add up.
Okay.
So when you do the tally of...
The numbers are there. When you do the 1 + 1 + 3 + 4...
doesn't add up to 10. It's coming up to 15. Yet we had 10 voters.
10 voters in this particular station. Okay.
The others is what you'll find even in majority of our submissions, of the submissions in the Supreme Court, where there was a debate when they were printing the 34A form itself. They printed two booklets. And that secondary booklet was said, Pole, it was done by mistake.
Wait. I don't understand. When you print the booklet, you print a certain number based on the numbers of people you expect to vote.
True.
So there are many booklets.
No. The booklets of 34As. The final...
Yes, but even that one, it can't be one booklet.
Essentially, you expect it to be 290.
Aha. So you're saying there were more than 290.
What IEBC did is that it printed 34A1
and 34A-B
and the 34A2 with different security features. And when they were caught, I said, Poleni.
They all agreed that we're not only going to use 34A1.
Yes.
Then right now, what you're
So
seeing...
you're saying is that there are some instances where 34A2 has been uploaded.
Many of them, yes.
Okay. Now, my question, all these things that you've said are on the portal. How different are they from what arrived at Bomas? So when I hear that there was a B that was uploaded on the portal, of course, it's not a B that arrived at Bomas. So that is a glaring kubaliane to Swende. Is there an instance where a 34A2 was uploaded on the portal and a 34A1 arrived at Bomas and they had difference in numbers?
Yes, those are there. And
So
many of them.
So that the one that is on the portal, 34A2, has George at 70,000, and the one that arrives at Bomas has George at 45,000.
Yes.
I'm still confused. This form 34, I mean, we're calling it 1 and 2. Were they actually indicated from 34A1 and 34B?
No.
They just from 34A.
Yes,
Yes, but it was a
but
booklet.
the difference is the security features on each.
So we are calling it 2, but it isn't indicated 2.
No.
But the security features is what makes these forms different.
Yes.
And you're then saying that when matters came to BOMA, the forms came to BOMA, you suddenly found that there were Form 34, the variety of Form 34 that was brought
Yes.
was not the variety that had been agreed upon
Yes.
that
They said
would
they
be
would
used.
not use
The
a
different
certain
species.
booklet.
Yes.
And it turns out, according to what George is saying, that they did.
You see, the commitment given originally was the intent was not clear. But when the same came up, there was a conversation and agreeable. Let's not print this. And it was done. But that commitment seemed not to have been lived up to when it comes to IEBC. Because the essentially what they did is that they printed everything, they brought out everything, and you find that mistake. The other mistakes, for instance, you find that is what you were saying on the D-Day when you found your constituency ballot papers in the other side of town.
Yeah.
And essentially, within an hour, I think there's one. I'm not sure which one it is, but within an hour, the actual polling station on the other side is open. So the question is, does it mean that we had 2 sets of ballot papers for that very constituency that were in a different location, printed, so that when they were discovered on the other side of town, as a Poleni, these ones will be recalled, and the disparity in distance means that they couldn't have gotten there within the hour.
So were they?
I don't know.
We don't know if they were recalled. Do we see from a total tally that it would have included them? And I think, look, it looks like it's menial, and it's like it doesn't really matter in terms of the details. But if looking at overall, then it actually does.
Yes.
It does matter. But and this is the thing, going back to the technology, is it absolutely possible? I've seen a comment here that somebody said a few minutes ago and said, look, we're not supposed to depend on this technology. Technology is then supposed to enable the human factor to get things done. Are we looking at that? So, but then if we do that, then that also opens up the possibility for the manipulation of the same technology to bring about desired results.
You see, as much as we want to depend on technology, it's a question of its influence on our decisions and its influence on the final outcome. When the issue of Cambridge Analytica came up, it was a very good story on how much data was used to influence decisions. And it's suddenly what is happening right now, where the buyer behavior, for instance, is being influenced by some of the content that you're seeing online. If tomorrow, for instance, you feel like you want to take your son or your child for holiday, and you just Google holiday, the whole day or the next couple of days, you keep seeing hotel pop-ups and all that. And it's behavioral driven because of what technology is doing. So essentially what we are doing is that as much as we want to depend on technology, we want to ensure that the free and actual intent is demonstrated in the actual outcome of the very elections that we will be having. So it is the enablement of technology that we want to depend on, not the capability of the technology to be used to influence us that we would like to take advantage of.
Conclude, George. So what do we expect to hear from your side when it comes to this particular petition? What will you be saying? That the servers were hacked, that the data were manipulated, that the polling stations were... What is it? What is the thrust of this issue?
I think the simple bottom line is that the technology was designed willfully to fail. And that in itself should be the aspects that should be driven. And one of the things that I would want to hear from the Supreme Court is the bungling of election should be made a punishable offense, either by making it treasonable, so that we send people to the gallows, or we get people punitively punished for some of these things.
Individually held responsible.
True.
Thank you very much. George NJOROGE is Azimio's data guy. He's CEO and founder of East Africa Data Handlers, the company that also does all these cyber forensics and cybersecurity jobs around the country. Thank you very much for joining us and for staying for 2 hours.
Asante
Came
sana.
for lunch, stayed for dinner.
That's a thing.
At this rate, you might be here for breakfast.
And thank you for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation, the 3-year-old SpiceFM. As we celebrate our birthday this week, we keep saying thank you
I'll
for
leave
tuning
the
in. Yeah? I hope you're living in the cake. Eh? Tafuta kwa sava. Have a lovely day. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.